Podcast 3. Finding Worth. A journey from survival to self-acceptance. Welcome back to our series, where we explore faith, resilience, and breaking free from the limitations that have held us back. I'm Liz Wells, and today we're diving into something deeply personal. Something that began long before I faced death and received a second chance at life. It's a story about finding my worth in a world that told me I didn't have any. In this episode, I'll be taking you back to my childhood, a time when the seeds of self-doubt were planted, when affection was something to be earned, and when my mere existence seemed more of a burden than a joy. It wasn't until I faced death, staring it down in a hospital room, that I realised I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. And not just survive, but live with purpose, with meaning, and with the knowledge that my life had value. Let's begin. After coming face to face with death and surviving, I began a journey of self-reflection, one that took me back to my earliest memories, back to a childhood where I never felt worthy, never felt good enough. It's strange, but sometimes it takes a life-threatening event to force us to unpack the baggage that we've been carrying for years. My journey began in that place, my childhood, a time marked by inconsistent parenting, power games, and love that had to be earned. The rules were always changing, and nothing ever felt safe. I remember vividly a particular memory that stood out, one that shaped how I viewed myself for years to come. It was the day I was chosen for the school choir. We were preparing for a concert, a big deal for me at the time. I loved the practice, the music, but the performance, the idea of my parents coming to see me terrified me. I didn't tell them, not at first. I was filled with dread, not excitement. This wasn't stage fright. It was the fear of judgment, of disappointing them, of not being enough. I remember the day clearly. I told my mum I had a practice just so she'd drop me off at the school. But when my parents arrived, they realised it was a concert. They were furious. Not because they'd missed a moment in my life, but because they hadn't been informed and might be shown up in front of other parents. The disappointment, the anger. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was all about them. That moment stuck with me. I stood there on the stage looking out at the other parents, beaming with pride, while I was drowning in a fog of anxiety and sadness. For one evening, I just wanted to be like everyone else, singing and performing. But the cost was high. The questions, the outrage, the guilt. I learned to keep things to myself after that. I retreated into myself. And for much of my childhood, I felt isolated, alone, and unworthy of love or attention. Fast forward through the years to adulthood, to the moment I was told I was dying. Strangely, the idea of death didn't scare me at first. I'd spent my life feeling so small, so unseen, that death almost felt like an escape. But when the reality of it hit, when I stood at the edge of that cliff, I realised something surprising. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. It wasn't death itself that I feared, It was the regret of leaving this world without having done the things I was meant to do, without truly living. For the first time, I realised I had worth, I had value, and not just to those around me, but in my own right. My life mattered. I mattered. That realisation changed everything. Even in the face of sickness and death, I had people, strangers, fighting for me, caring for me, and ultimately saving my life. I wasn't just here to be discarded or forgotten. I had a purpose. And that purpose didn't begin when I received a life-saving liver transplant. It began the moment I chose to live. The moment I sat in the hospital, facing death, and realised that my story wasn't over yet. Thank you for joining me on this deeply personal journey. It's a strange thing, isn't it? Sometimes it takes coming face to face with death to truly understand the value of life and our place in it. In those dark moments, I discovered something I'd been missing for years: my worth. If this episode resonated with you, if you've ever struggled with feeling like you weren't enough, I want you to know that you're not alone. Our worth isn't defined by others. It's something that exists within us. Something that God placed there long before we ever realised it. Join me next time as we continue this journey of self-discovery, healing and faith, because this story is just the beginning and there's so much more to uncover. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, you have worth, you have value, and you're not in a box.